Good morning, everyone. I dedicate today's Mishna, today's learning, in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamis Bas Yaakov Eliezer. We are in Mishnah Yismaiser Sheni, Parakeh Mishnah Vav, Chapter 5, Mishnah 6. So we're now about to start discussing a mitzvah called the Biur Meiser. That means it's like this. As we have been learning, when a person has their new produce, that there are separations we have to make for it. We have to make Truma going to the Kohen, Meiser Rishon, the first tithing that goes to the Levi, Meiser Sheni goes to Yerushalayim on the fourth and sixth year of the Shemitah cycle. Instead of Meiser Sheni, it's Meiser Ani. Meiser goes to the poor. We have Bikurim to separate from the first ripened fruits. We have a number of these things that have to be done. Now, it doesn't mean that when you, let's say, separate Meiser Sheni or any of the other things, that the second you're going to separate it, you're necessarily going to take care of it. Meiser Sheni especially, you got to take to Yerushalayim. You can separate Truma and Meiser and everything, and, you may not actually give it to the Kohen or to the Levi or to us to go to for a while. And a lot of times these things used to kind of pile up. People wouldn't get mixed up in other things, but it got piled up and it was never kind of taken care of. It was never taken care of. And the Torah actually makes an obligation called biur, which we translate as removal, that says that twice in the 7-year cycle, you have to remove all the things you're supposed to separate and take care of. You've got to do it at a certain time of the year. Now, according to Torah law, this takes place, this biur, this removal, takes place in the 4th and 7th years of the Shemitah cycle. In essence, you've got the first 3 years of the Shemitah cycle. So by Pesach of the 4th, that's when you do biur. That's when everything that you have not taken care of, meaning anything you have not removed, we'll just call it removed right now, anything that hasn't been removed has to be removed by Pesach of the 4th year, covering the previous 3 years. And covering the 4th and 5th and 6th years, you have to do it Pesach of the Shemitah year. The produce of Shemitah is exempt from all of this, from any of these separations that we're talking about. Interestingly, Shemitah has its own biur, its own removal a mitzvah. But we're talking about now the biur, what's called biur maisris, of all these separations that we've mentioned. And it's Pesach of those years that you have to have this biur done. Now, according to Torah law, you have the entire Yontif of Pesach, meaning you have until the end of Pesach to do this. The Rabbanan, as we're going to see in the Mishnah, pushed it up to Erev Pesach. You've got to do it by the time Pesach, but you have to do it on Pesach. You have to do it on Erev Pesach. That's when you got to get it done by. You got to make sure it's done on Erev Pesach before Pesach starts. Now, when we talk about removal, we're going to see it depends on what we're talking about. Some of the things, removal means get it out of your domain and give it to whomever it's supposed to go to. In other cases, it's going to be get it out of your domain and destroy it. And destroy it can either mean burning it or throwing it into the sea. So this is a general, overview of this mitzvah biur that we're going to be discussing now for the next couple of Mishnayos. Okay. So Erev Yom Tov Harishon Shel Pesach Shel Revius V'Shel Shvius. On Erev of the first Yontif of Pesach, we would call that the Erev of the first day of Pesach, and Eretz is only one day. So Erev Pesach, Erev Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, Erev, the day before the first Yontif of Pesach, Shel Revius V'Shel Shvius, of the 4th year of the Shemitah cycle, and the 7th year of the Shemitah cycle, Haya biur, that's when the mitzvah of removal had to be performed, as we explained before. Kates and Haya biur. How was biur performed? How was it done? Any truma that you have will still by you. You have to give the truma and the trumas meiser to its owners. Truma goes to the Kohen. Trumas meiser is what the Levi has to give from the Meiser that he receives. He has to now give a separate. He has to now separate a truma from that for the Kohanim. So whether you're a Yisrael or whether you're a Levi, you've got to make sure to get your truma to the owner, to its owners, to a Kohen. The first tithing, the first tenth goes to its owners, which, as we've mentioned previously, you first take off truma to give to the Kohen, then you take off Meiser Rishon. The first Meiser goes to the Levi, and then the Levi is going to separate from his Meiser, from his tenth, a tenth of that tenth for the Kohen. Umeiser Ani Labalav. And when it comes to the Meiser that goes to the poor, which takes place in the 4th and 6th years of the Shemitah cycle in place of Meiser Sheni, got to make sure it goes to its owner. So that is how you perform biur by these things. Get them to whom they're supposed to go to. Umeiser Sheni Vabikurim. But when it comes to Meiser Sheni, meaning you separated Meiser Sheni and you did not take it up to Yerushalayim. And here it is, Erev Pesach. And, you haven't eaten in Yerushalayim yet. Umeiser Sheni Vabikurim Misparim V'chol Makim. Meiser Sheni and Bikurim are going to be removed from every place. To remove from every place means they are destroyed. We learn from the words of the psukim of the verses that deal with this mitzvah that certain things are given to their owners and certain things are destroyed. Meiser Sheni and Bikurim, if you do not take care of them by Erev Pesach, you have to destroy it. Now, Meiser Sheni is what we're studying right now. We know there the produce or the monies have to be taken to Yerushalayim. If they weren't, it have to be taken to Yerushalayim and have to be taken to Yerushalayim and eaten Yerushalayim. If they weren't, by Erev Pesach, they haven't been taken care of, you got to destroy them. Bikurim, just to explain the mitzvah of Bikurim is that we take the first ripened fruits of the 7, fruits of the land of Israel that the Torah mentions, which are wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. That's what the first ripened ones, the first ripened fruits of these 7 species, the mitzvah of Bikurim is done with. You take to Yerushalayim, bring it to the Beis Hamikdash. It's given to the Kohen, and there's a special declaration that's made. If you haven't done this by Erev Pesach of the 4th and 7th years, you now have to destroy it. Rabbi Shimon says, Habikurim nitanim lakohanim ketruma. Rabbi Shimon says the bikurim are given to kohanim like truma. Now this, I find this Rabbi Shimon's opinion very interesting, and that is, according to Rabbi Shimon says like this: truma, we know you don't destroy it; you give it to its owner, give it to a kohen. Now bikurim in the Beis Hamikdash, when a person goes and brings his bikurim to the Beis Hamikdash, he gives it to the kohen puts it down by the altar, and the person who brings it makes a special declaration. It's called Mikra Bikurim, the reading of Bikurim. What happens to those fruits afterwards? They are not put on the altar. They're taken by the Kohanim. So the Bikurim go to the Kohanim. More so, Bikurim are called Truma. The Torah refers to Bikurim as Truma, and therefore we find that Bikurim has many laws just like Truma because of that. Rabbi Shimon says that extends to biur also. The fact that Torah called it Truma says it's like Truma. How do you do biur on Truma? You give it to a Kohen. How do you do biur on Bikurim? You give it to a Kohen. That's Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Now, the Tanna Kama argued on that. I did not see in the commentaries the explanation as to why they argue. Again, they have their verse, which they interpret to say that when there are certain words that imply destroying by biur, the first opinion says that refers to Meiser Sheni and Bikurim. That's where they derive it from. Reb Shimon apparently doesn't. Now, Reb Shimon agrees by Meiser Sheni it's destroyed. So apparently he agrees with that derivation, at least for Meiser Sheni. But after Bikurim, why? Because Bikurim is called Truma. By being called Truma, it gets the same laws of Truma. The halach is not like Reb Shimon. And I was thinking that perhaps the reason why, the way to argue Reb Shimon is the following. As I mentioned before, it's true that Bikurim is called Truma, and therefore it's treated like Truma. But regarding beer, to say that I will give Bikurim to a Kohen because it's called Truma is not the same thing as what you do by Truma, because by Truma, you separate Truma, you give it to the Kohen. By Bikurim, you don't just separate and give it to a Kohen. You got to bring it to the Beis HaMikdash first. And once you bring it to the Beis HaMikdash, then it goes to the Kohen. And according to Reb Shimon, the way I understand Reb Shimon is saying, if you didn't take Bikurim, you didn't take care of Bikurim until now, the way you were supposed to, you'll give it to a Kohen like Truma. You won't destroy, you'll give it to a Kohen like Truma. But that doesn't happen. But that doesn't happen the same way as Truma Bikurim. Bikurim, I got to take it to the Beis HaMikdash first. So it's not exactly the same as Truma, and therefore perhaps that's the reason why that would be the basis to argue on Reb Shimon's argument that we find Bikurim is called Truma. Sure, it can be treated like Truma, but in this kind of when it comes to beer, it's still very different than Truma because of the way that in general it's given to the Kohen is very different than Truma, and therefore it would not be the same. Okay, hatafshel, new case. Hatafshel means a cooked dish that has meiser sheni ingredients in it. Because it's cooked, the meiser sheni ingredients are not that noticeable. They cannot be easily seen in this food. They're there, but they can't be seen. They can't be easily seen, let's put it that way. So the question is now, you've got this food, it's got meiser sheni. It's time for beer. You didn't take this food to, you should be taking this food to Yerushalayim to eat it because it has meiser sheni in it. But you didn't do it. Now it's time for beer. What do? Beis Shammai say, tzarech levayer, you got to destroy it. It's got meiser sheni in it. It's beer time. What do you do by beer for meiser sheni? But what do you do for meiser sheni by beer? You destroy it. Well, Beis Hillel but Beis Hillel say, harehu k'mavur. It's like it's destroyed already. The fact that it has been cooked with other ingredients and it cannot easily be seen, that Beis Hillel says that in itself is a fulfillment of beer. It's done. Interestingly, at the end of the day, it's not like it's not there. You got to take Yerushalayim. You still got to take Yerushalayim and eat it. You can't eat outside of Yerushalayim. Nonetheless, when it comes to the mitzvah of beer, of removal, the fact that it's cooked up is called removed. Since the mitzvah by beer, since beer by mitzvah, removing by meiser sheni, removing meiser sheni means to destroy it. This is called destroyed. It's not here anymore. It's part of the food. You can't see it. It's like it's not here anymore. That itself is a fulfillment of beer for meiser sheni. Okay, we are now in continuing with the laws of Lashon Harah from the Chavetz Chaim, Klal Vav, chapter 6. Actually, now we're starting chapter 7. Sif Aleph, paragraph 1. Isra Kabbalas Lashon Harah hu. The prohibition of accepting Lashon Harah is afilu mesaper sadavarim befirsim if they come on Hashem. Even if the one who's telling it said it publicly in front of many people. Based on that, you cannot believe that it's true. But as he mentioned before, those who hear it should take it into consideration, consider it as a possibility, and to investigate. And if it comes out that it's true, they'll rebuke the person for doing it. This was one of the conditions made before. You know, when you're listening, when you hear this Lashon Harah, you first of all have to speak to the person before he continues to see if it has any relevance to you or any importance to protect yourself and others. And if he says it does, and you hear what he says, you do not accept it, but you investigate. You can consider it enough to investigate and see how it goes further regarding to possibly rebuking this person. But the point of this paragraph is that the fact that this person got up and said in front of many people, so people might say, well, he wouldn't make up a story in front of so many people. The answer is that's not enough of a basis to accept what he's saying is the truth. Base. Paragraph 2. Ein shum heter lahamin b'lashon hara afilu mesaper sipur alav halashon hara b'fanav. You also cannot believe Lashon Harah if Lashon Harah was said in front of the person it was spoken about. Meaning, so one basis would say, he said it in front of his face. It's got to be true. Nope. Number one, that's not enough of a basis. And number two, just because it's in front of the other person, we haven't seen any admittance on that person's part. All the more so if he's not saying it in front of the person. Just that this person says, meaning the teller says, I would say this even in front of his face. I mean, that's what he says. He's not there, but he says, I would say this. I'm not afraid to say this. I would say it in front of him. Still, the asr lamin anytime that you still can't believe it because you have no admittance on the part of the person spoken about. People, unfortunately, make a mistake with this. Now, let's say the person is speaking the Lashon Harah in front of the person that he's speaking about, and the person remains silent, doesn't respond. Even so, one cannot use that as a proof to say that it's true what was said. Even if you know the nature of this person is that he doesn't stay quiet when he hears things that he doesn't like. And now he's quiet. Now we have a principle in halacha, it's called shtika kaidah. Silence is like admitting. Because if it wasn't true, then you should pipe up. You should refute it. You should argue it. If you don't argue it, then it's a sign of giving in. It's a sign of admitting. The Chavetz Chaim is saying that doesn't apply here. And even if this is a person who, by nature, doesn't stay quiet when he hears things he doesn't like. So why is he quiet now? Seems to be another level of proof. Says the Chavetz Chaim, you still can't use it as a basis to believe. Ki ulai niskaber ata al tivai. Maybe now he decided to control himself. And he decided he is not going to respond and create a quarrel. He's not going to get into a quarrel. Or he realizes that they're going to believe the other guy more than him anyway. Like this unfortunate habit of people. That people already decide if this person is going to speak in front of him and say these words about him in front of his face, even if the person would refute it 100 times, they're not going to believe him anymore. Meaning there's no point. There's no point of arguing. People are just going to believe what the other person says. And so he decided, you know what, better to be quiet. I love him and to be from those who are shamed instead of shaming back. And therefore it's forbidden to take this as any kind of proof to decide that this is true. So although there is, in other areas, there is a concept of remaining silent is a form of admittance, here, the Chavetz Chaim says that's not going to apply because there is a good reason for being quiet. I think in a simple sense, if you claim, I'm not going to go jumping into other examples right now. But although there is a concept that silence is like admitting, which we do find, for instance, there could be situations where if you demand something from someone, make a claim against someone, he doesn't respond, that sometimes can be an admittance because the expectation is that you will refute. If this person tried to make a claim against you, then you should be refuting if it's not true. But here, when it comes to Lashon Harah, to accept Lashon Harah, the point is that we have a reason to say why he was quiet, and that it's therefore not a proof that it was that he's admitting. And the proof would be is that he realizes that here he is, someone's putting him down, And there could be, and even though he can be someone who typically doesn't stay silent, it's still very possible that what this person decided to do is not to get into a fight, or that there's no point of refuting because they're not going to believe me anyway. So there's no point. And therefore, and I think, but no point means there's no point, then I'm just going to look bad anyway. I'm just going to look maybe worse. And therefore, he remained silent. Once we have reasons to explain why remain silent, even if it's not true, therefore, there is no basis to say that it is true just because the person heard what was said about him and he remained silent. Have a wonderful day.